I was walking the streets. I remember the first night that I did a date and I actually went through with it and didn't just rob them. And that became my number one go-to day in and day out. And I walked the streets of Columbus every single day. I lived in abandos. I washed up in gas station bathrooms. I bowed down to whatever doughboy had the best stuff. Rate became normal. You win some, you lose some, but if you're still breathing, you get into that next car. And I remember so many times I would get out of a car and I would be crying. And it was not because I got raped, it would be because I didn't make no money. Hi, my name is Melissa Stacy, and I am the housing director and also clinical staff member for Another Chance / Full Circle Recovery Services. I also am an anti-human trafficking consultant, as well as a trainee utilizing my lived experiences. Living in sin for me almost cost me my life. Actually, even worse than losing my life, caused me misery, despair, and feeling like there was no hope for me. Based off of the decisions and the choices that I made, it led me into a lot of really bad, almost life-taking situations. And it led me to believe that God didn't love me, and that I wasn't worthy, and that I didn't matter, and that serving God was pointless, because even in serving God, bad things still happen. And so it almost took away the blessing of an understanding of what it actually truly means to serve God. So growing up, I'm originally from Alabama. I was in 22 schools by the time I was in the 3rd grade, because my mother and my stepfather were in the union. And so they were welders and pipe fitters, and we traveled a lot. And so stability and making friends and playing sports and stuff like that really wasn't something that we did growing up. We lived in hotels, trailer parks, with family, with friends. I have an older sister who is my hero, and she's the only thing that has been consistent in my life since day one. And so I remember growing up, my stepfather, whom I have a great relationship with today, he was an alcoholic. And back then, I didn't understand a lot of things that was happening, but it was the only life that I knew. So a lot of what some people would see as bad or wrong was just normal for me. Yelling and screaming in the home was normal. My stepdad putting his hands on my mom was a reoccurring thing, and my mom always going back was a reoccurring thing. Me and my stepdad, we have a really good relationship today also. He lives in Tennessee. He is a pawpaw to my daughters. We have a great relationship. I have a great relationship with his wife. He's literally turned his life completely around. And again, that's nothing but the grace of God. My stepdad was the only dad that I knew, and he raised me and my sister. And I think that they did the best that they could do with what they were dealt with, because they both also struggled with addiction and alcoholism. As a child, I was molested. And so I started experiencing a lot of different emotions and feelings that I didn't know what to do with. And so before my identity was even developed, I feel like I was robbed of my identity because of the experiences that I was already facing and the things that I was already dealing with. And so, again, we traveled a lot, but I just remember as a kid, I started sexually experimenting at a really young age. And I don't know if it was from being molested that it led me to start wondering, or if that was how people loved me. What I saw love was abuse, attention, and not a good way. And so at 12, I lost my virginity, and sex in men, older men. I was 12 years old dating 18 and 19-year-olds. And those actually became the first unhealthy ways that I began to cope with some of the things that I was dealing with. And so May 15th of 2002, my mom shot and killed herself, and I woke up for school and found her dead. And I remember more feelings of abandonment and lost and unwanted, confused. I became really mad at God. I was the kid that would go to church with the neighborhood grandma, and I remember being in a play dressed up as a sheep, singing Messiah is Coming. And I remember my mom being in the audience. And so I do want to say, like, all my childhood memories wasn't bad. It just wasn't what that white picket fence life would look like. And so my mom shot and killed herself, and I found her dead getting ready for school. I later learned that she was actually going through withdrawals from pain medication. Her doctor was her drug dealer. And so she was prescribed an extreme amount of pain pills, and she became addicted to them. So when she didn't have them, she would get sick. And back then I didn't know what that felt like. So when I found my mom dead, I just remember, like, well, first off, I got made fun of at school. Kids would say things like, your mom didn't love you. Like, how could she do that with you in the back room? And then so I started to lie. I would lie about what my mom did, and I would tell people that she was murdered, and I would never tell nobody that she was the one to pull the trigger, because I was so judgmental towards what she did, and I was so mad at her, because it was like, you raised me to be this strong woman, and in the worldly views, you took the weakest way out. And then also, I was angry. Oh, I was so angry. I was just an angry child. I loved to fight. Always getting into it with people. I was considered like a mean girl. And so I also would never tell the truth about what my mom did, because I didn't want anybody else saying anything about it. Which kind of drew a wedge in between me and my sister, because my sister knew how I felt and she knew the things that I would say. And so my mom's death was one thing that we never spoke about. When my mom died, I met my real dad for the first time. Besides a few times growing up, like, we got to go see him, but we didn't really get to, like, be a part of his life. He was also an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I met him after my mother's showing. And I remember, like, I didn't even know which one he was from him or my uncle. And when I first, so I had to move in with him. I had to live with him. And it was like living with basically a stranger. My sister was only 17 at the time, so she couldn't take me. And she lived in Ohio. She stayed with her boyfriend. And so here goes those feelings of, like, feeling abandoned, feeling unwanted, no place to go. Like, I didn't belong anywhere, because I was just like, I was the little girl. Whew. I was the little girl that nobody knew what to do with. And so I just became so mad. Like, I think about it now, and I just had so much hate and anger and bitterness in my heart, mad at everybody, because I was just so confused. And it goes back to, like, I was just one of those people, like, if this is what it looks like to serve God, like, serve God for what? Like, all these things have already happened. So to me, it was like, serving you did me no good, because I didn't have a real understanding of what it meant to serve God and what it looked like. Serving God doesn't mean everything is like rainbows all the time. Serving God is really hard sometimes. And we're so quick to blame him for things. And I think as a child that had to grow up really fast, I think that's what I was doing. And so I moved in with my dad, and he was in drug court for the first year. He was on felony probation. And I was the little girl in the AA meetings in the corner, like, playing with a book or playing on a phone or something while my dad was getting his meeting in. And he had to report every day, and he had to drop every day. And so that's what our first year consisted of was. And he would try to make me go to counseling, and they would try to make me take pills. Like, that was supposed to make things any better. But watching my mom take her life because of pills, I was always very against that. And I remember one time they even tried to court order me to take pills. And that rebellious spirit of just, like, going against the grain, against everything and everyone, because I was so lost and I was so confused and I was so hurt. So to speed up a little bit, at the age of 14, I acquired my first charge. My dad had moved me to Ohio. I acquired my first charge. I get sent to JDC. And I stayed in there for a little bit. So now I was like the mean, bad girl in school, but I was cool with everybody. And I go to JDC. The judge goes to let me out, and my dad tells the judge that I didn't have a home to come to because I pushed him to a point to where he didn't know what to do with me. He'd never raised a daughter in his entire life, and then when he does get his daughter, she's a mess because of everything that has happened to her. And so they put me in foster care. And my sister was starting her family and starting her life, and so she couldn't take me at the time, and now, like, I understand why, but, like, back then, it was just, like, those feelings of, like, nobody wants me, like, I don't matter, and, so I got this really good foster family, and I will never forget them. I was actually here in Chillicothe, believe it or not, and I remember, like, when I lived with this family, we would do normal things like eat at the dinner table, and the mom would, like, let me sit in between her legs, and she would brush my hair and, like, braid it for school, and I was good, and I wasn't doing drugs, and I wasn't getting in trouble, and, like, I was getting good grades for the period of time that I was there. And I remember just having, like, oh, this is what it feels like. Like, this is what that's like, this is what I see other kids have. And me, like, even growing up, traveling everywhere, and then even I just never had stability. Like, I never knew what that would look like. I guess the white picket fence idea of what you think the world is, if that's how we could say it. So there became a time where they were ready to give me back to my dad. And this is where things got a little bit worse for me. I started experimenting with pain pills, started experimenting with ecstasy, marijuana, alcohol. It was a weekend thing. I'm 15, dating 22-year-olds, so I was always dating older men, lying about my age. I always acted older than I was because I kind of had to grow up pretty fast, And so it was a weekend thing, and I remember, like, I loved, like, the bad boy, the life, just getting just, like, a taste of it. And how, like, even in that, before I became addicted to the pills, like, made me feel good. It made me feel alive. It made me feel free because I just was so lost and so broken. And then not only that, like, I struggled from never feeling wanted or, like, always being a problem to where with these people, like, I was always welcomed and I was always needed. And I was good at that lifestyle. Like, I learned that really quickly. And I always never felt like I was good at anything because it was like, if I am, then why doesn't anybody want me? So by the age of 18, I've quit school, which before I quit, like, I had dreams. I actually wanted to do cosmetology, and I wanted to open up my own salon. And I was really good at doing hair. I still am. And I wanted to make people feel good about themselves because I remember even through everything, like, always just wanting to make people feel good so that they never felt any of the feelings that I felt. And so back to when I started doing pain pills, like, I remember, like, I loved it. On them weekends, like, I forgot about everything. I forgot about my mom. I forgot about all the bad things that happened to me. I forgot about the feelings that I was feeling. And I remember one morning I woke up and I was so sick, and I thought it was just like a cold or something. And my friend's like, no, you need to do another pill. And so that's just where that was the beginning of a nightmare for me. I started doing pain pills every single day. It was Oxycontins at the time. I quit school. My sister, she always would try to do, like, special birthdays for me. And she always did. And I remember my 18th birthday, I lived with her. And she did everything for me. She tried her best to provide me with a life that I would love and that I would want to keep. And literally went above and beyond for me. She was my mom, And I wrote her a letter. This is how, like, in depth I was, and the misery, the pain, and already in my addiction. I wrote her a letter telling her that I was moving out, and she had these plans. When she came home, she couldn't come. She couldn't wait to come home for my birthday and all this stuff. And then, like, will never forget getting her message. And that's just, like, how I was. That's the type of person I was growing up, because I was just so resistant to everybody because everybody always left. But my sister never did, but I always left her. And it's crazy. I'm just realizing that now, just now talking about it. And so I went from pain pills to heroin very fast. And I went from snorting heroin to shooting heroin very fast. That became my new love. I fell in love with it. And at that point, like, I was unstoppable, and I didn't care what other people were doing, and I didn't care how it was destroying my life. So when my mom shot and killed herself because of the pain pills, they actually had blamed doctors, and I got a huge settlement from it. And they had assigned me a trustee, and so the trustee would give me so much money, but the whole time, like, I was robbing him. I was figuring out ways to get him to write me checks so that I could take the money and I could go buy drugs. At this point, I'm selling drugs, robbing people, hanging out with bad men. It always started with a man for me. Most of the relationships were abusive, whether verbally or physically. I depended on a man. A man was like my God, basically. And so sex and money, men, drugs were like the lifestyle for me. Those became my coping skills and how I escaped everything that I was feeling, and how I prevented myself from like really living in reality. And so I went to heroin, and I went to shooting heroin fairly fast, fairly quickly, in and out of jail, and involved with the law. And I was always a runner. I would always run. I would never, go turn myself into my PO or any of those things. This whole entire time, I would go periods of 6 months to a year without talking to my sister, and she wouldn't know where I was. And in my mind, I'm like doing her a favor so that I don't stress her out or worry her, or it's better off because of the type of people that I was around that they don't even know I have a sister. I didn't even go by my first name. Nobody, I was just like a mystery. Like, nobody knew really anything about me unless they grew up with me. And so I would go a long time without talking to my sister, and I tried the geographical change, and I just remember just being so broken and so lost and just so miserable, like wanting to die. And there would be times that I would get a hold of my sister, and I would beg her for money or whatever. And my real dad, I would get a hold of him, and he would give me pills, or we would smoke weed together. And I honestly think now, looking back, he was probably just trying to have a relationship with me the best way that he knew how. He hated the lifestyle that I lived, and he would keep telling me, like, one of these days you're going to have to get it together because you and your sister are going to need each other. And so I go from Ohio to Nebraska thinking that if I tried geographical change, something would work for me, because I was getting really bad on the heroin. Breaking needles off in my neck. I still have a needle broke off in my neck, breaking them off in my arm, not getting proper medical care, just really bad, dangerous situations, and like nothing was stopping me. So I go to Nebraska. While I'm there, I stopped using heroin. I started using methamphetamines, and I remember that I absolutely hated methamphetamines. It was literally the worst high, but it was better than facing who I was without the drugs. And so while I was there, I went to actually go try to live with my stepdad, and he didn't even know that I was coming. And I met this group of people, and I started hanging out with them. And I remember, like, I would get so drunk and so high to the point that I would black out, and I would wake up with somebody else beside me. And I remember, like, I didn't remember anything. Sometimes I would be hurting, but I didn't know what happened the night before. And so just to cover it up, like, I would just drink again. I would drink that big gallon of vodka until I blacked out. And it was just like a routine thing. And I was branded on my hand, which it's covered up now, of the word hoe and whore. And that's how people viewed me, like, and I would bow down to these people. Like, with them, I was something, and without them, I was nothing. And so one day we were driving. I was actually the only one who didn't drink that time, but I had taken a bunch of Xanaxes. And we got into a really bad car accident, and I was ejected through the front windshield, and I was in a coma. And I remember waking up to an empty hospital room, and, like, once again, those feelings of nobody wants me, feeling like a burden, like I don't matter, just fueled the fire because nobody was there. There was like this nutrition lady and like a caseworker to try to talk to me to get me off drugs. were the only ones sitting in the room. And I remember later on I had asked my sister why she wasn't there, and she had told me she planned a trip and she had plane tickets and everything, and when she was getting ready to leave, the doctor said that I woke up. But the first phone call that she got was that I wasn't going to make it and that I wasn't going to wake up. And, I think about it today and I'm like, how could I even expect her to come and run to me? Because once again, I got myself in a situation, even if I was about to die, like I literally put her through hell and pushed her to the point to where she had to show me tough love. Like she had to take a step back. I don't know anybody that would have continued the way that she did. She was the only one that never gave up on me no matter what I did. And even when she had to distance herself, I still don't believe that she ever gave up on me. And so I remember being in the hospital and all I could think about was getting out of there. Like I just wanted to get out of there. And so I got a ride. And what I would do is I would always rob one man to get to the next man. And so that's basically what I did. And I went back to Ohio. As soon as I got back to Ohio, I started doing Oxycontin again. And then right back to heroin. At this point, I was in Columbus, Ohio, and just ripping and running, bowing down to whatever man I was with at the time. I would always say that I would never sell myself for drugs. And I remember like I would recruit women, or I would motivate other people, or I would arrange dates or whatever, not knowing that like technically it's a form of trafficking. To me, in my mind back then, it was just another survival mode, another way to make it one more day, one more minute, one more second. I would recruit women. And it didn't matter what I had to do to get him to do what I wanted him to do. I would do it. And I was dating a guy at the time that like I was being basically controlled. If I didn't do what they said, then something would happen to me. And so it was just like this domino effect, this never-ending cycle. Well, I started experimenting with like bath salts, running around different cities and whatnot, and I was on the run, and I decided to go to West Virginia with another guy. And while I was there, we were actually buying heroin from someone, and things with me and this guy didn't work out, so I actually started dating the guy that I was buying the heroin from. And they act like there's levels to drug use and to what you're using, and so to him, I was only using heroin. Or to him, I was actually only doing pain pills, but I was actually stealing from him the whole time. And so I was like a drug mule for him. I would run drugs back and forth to wherever he told me to. And I remember he got a phone call back that somebody's stuff was short, and he asked me about it, and I told him the truth, thinking that that would get me off the hook. And prior to this, he had never put his hands on me. The next morning, I go to light a cigarette, and I ask him for a lighter. Instead of a lighter, I get a fist to the face. And this is how I viewed myself. This is how I had no self-worth, no self-love, no self-respect. With the man, I was something. Without a man, I was nothing. And I remember he beat me black and blue. You couldn't even tell what color my skin was. He beat me so bad. And I just got up, and I was on my knees, and I apologized to him for stealing from him. And that was how I viewed myself. I was basically just like the scum under somebody's shoes in all situations, no self-worth of any kind. And even just talking about it, it's really hard for me to imagine and view myself in that way now today, because nobody could ever take that from me again. And that's nothing but the grace of God that I've even gotten to that point, or was able to even build myself back up. And so, he used to say things to me like, thank you for turning my house into a home, and thank you for loving my son. And I would do things like take his son to the bus stop and just like normal stuff. But I also did things that I'll never be able to take back, like miss my sister's wedding. I think about that all the time. I'll always be the sister that wasn't there. I probably would have been her bridesmaid or her maid of honor. I think about that all the time. Like, I'll never be able to go back to that point and to relive that memory with her. I'll always be the one that wasn't there. And that became a period of like how my addiction went. I was always the one not there because I was too busy getting high, or I was too wrapped up into the lifestyle. So I started running drugs back and forth from Ohio to West Virginia, and we ended up getting a flat tire and got pulled over by the cops, and I ended up going to jail. And when I went to jail, they had me for my felony warrants. The judge offered me stars. I said that I didn't have a behavioral problem, so I went to prison. And we just felt like I was actually talking to my sister again, because every time I would get in trouble, I would call her like, you owe me something now. And she would always be there to support me, and she would always be there to encourage me. And I would always tell her that I was done and that I didn't want to do it anymore. And I'm going to be honest, like still to this point, to this day, when I was saying that, like I really meant it. But there's something about when you get out, like you have no foundation, you have no God, you have no coping skills, you haven't worked on anything. And so eventually all that stuff catches up to you. And so if you're only focusing on the external, the internal will eventually devour you. And that's what would happen to me every single time. I would get my weight up and I would look good and I would get back in contact with my sister. And then I would get out and like the internal was just like something, when that air hit me, like I would go right back to the streets. And all my friends were always there waiting for me. So I go to prison. And I remember I was so scared. Like I thought it was just going to be like what I seen on the movies. And so I went in there with like a really bad attitude. Like nobody's about to take advantage of me. And so I got into a fight and I went to the hole. I went to the hole and I actually was in the hole with some lifers. And they taught me some things, and they basically said, you can either do your time and get out, or you can do your time and hope you get out. And that was two very different meanings for me. So when I got out, I popped out in GP. I got a part of a leadership program and I started a step team. It gave me something to look forward to. It gave me purpose, and it gave something others to be a part of. And I remember, like, I wouldn't recommend prison to anybody, but I remember, like, I didn't want to get out. Like, my sister knew where I was. My nieces had somewhat of a relationship with me. I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't involved in the bad stuff. And like, I had some type of normal life behind bars. And I remember, so the judge had set the age for me to get my money for 25, and I turned 25 May 3rd, and I got out of prison May 9th. And I had this great plan, and me and my sister, I was going to give all the money to her and put it in her name, and she was going to help me with it and pay off my stuff and all of this great things. And I did all of that. I bought a new car. I gave my sister a little bit of money. I paid off all my fines, and then we put the rest up and let her be in control of it. And I got a job, and again, everything external looks great. I wore nice clothes, my weight was up, I was living with my sister, I was doing all the right things, I had a car, I had a job, but I had not worked on anything internally. None of the trauma, none of the grief, none of the insecurities, none of the anything. And so eventually it all caught up to me, and I wanted to be seen because everything looked good on the outside. And again, it always starts with the man. I met another guy, he sold marijuana, and I justified it as that's not that bad. I started selling it at work. And the next thing you know, instead of getting cash for it, I get Xanaxes. And the next thing you know, I have a bad day, and it was just off to the races. Like I never missed a beat. I destroyed the relationship with my sister because I would literally harass her until she would get the max money out of the ATM that she could for me. And every time she would tell me she was busy, or she would tell me that, or she would tell me this, and I would just harass her. And I remember, I mean, I'm so grateful now that our relationship is what it is, but I just put her through so much hell that I am just not even deserving of her today. And again, she still stayed by my side. So I would harass her until she would get the money out. And at this point, I'm using heroin, I'm smoking crack, I'm doing meth and bath salts. And so bath salts is where the 1A started for me. Believe it or not, I would get really high and I would get really paranoid. And I laugh about it now because I can, and I'm not the person. But every time I would do bath salts, I would call the cops on myself because that was the only time that I felt safe. And they always knew it was me, and they would just take me to 1A every single time. And I remember, like, to me, looking back, I feel like that's God intervening, because that drug is so insane. And people have done some really bad stuff on it that, like, if I didn't get put in 1A, like, what would I have done? Like, what would it have caused me to do? And I still think about that to this day. Like, I consider all the times I was put in 1A, all the times that I was arrested, is for me, it was God intervening in my life, because I was one of those people that was the only way he could stop me. That was the only way he could sit me down, was by arresting me or getting me put in 1A. And so I had a lot of stays in 1A, and it actually wasn't bad neither, like, to me, considering the lifestyle that I was living. And so I did that for a period of time. I lost everything in 8 months. My car that I bought was stolen. My rental car that I had was stolen and shot up. And so that was within a 3-week period. I ruined the relationship with my sister. And I'm back off to the races, and everything that I said I wouldn't do, I ended up doing. I was walking the streets. I remember the first night that I did a date, and I actually went through with it and didn't just rob them. And that became my number one go-to day in and day out. And I walked the streets of Columbus every single day. I lived in abandos. I washed up in gas station bathrooms. I bowed down to whatever doughboy had the best stuff. Rate became normal. You win some, you lose some, but if you're still breathing, you get into that next car. And I remember so many times I would get out of a car and I would be crying. And it was not because I got raped. It would be because I didn't make no money. And like, this is how I viewed myself. Like, it would get to a point to where for that period of time that I was in a car with the John, or whatever you want to call him, like, I felt wanted and I felt needed for a second. And I fed off of that. And the lifestyle was just so dangerous, which is crazy. Like, I don't even like to drive in the dark now. So to think that, like, I lived the life that I did is still sometimes so beyond me. Even sharing my story, it's just like, I get these like epiphanies of like, I cannot, like, it doesn't even seem real. It doesn't even, I know I'm telling the story. I know that I lived it, but my life is so different today. It's just so hard for me to imagine it. And it's nothing but the grace of God that I made it out of it. So I did that for a while. And I was like that girl that I was always down for anything, because I viewed the way that I viewed myself. I hated myself so much. And so the walking the streets led me into being trafficked. And they introduced me to him. I went to an apartment. And then he put me in a house. I did dates day in and day out. I had a quota. I had to meet 3 times a day. If I met my quota, I could have Sundays off. If I didn't meet my quota, I had to work Sundays too. And my vision for people became very blurred. I did dates with nurses, doctors, lawyers, probation officers, cops, detectives, bums, you name it. And so sometimes, even till to this day, it's really hard to, you know, people say they're this and they're that. On social media, we paint this great picture, and for me, I take a step back and I'm just like, how are you really living? You know, I don't care about your financial status or what your title is at your job. I've been encountered with so many people that are supposed to protect and supposed to keep people safe that did not. And so it become really hard, even when I did get clean, to be able to let those guards down and trust. And if I'm honest, like, my guards still ain't all the way down. And so I remember, like, I wanted to die so bad, and I'm like, Melissa, you are such a failure that you can't even kill yourself right. Like, you can't even die right. So many times I would do an ungodly amount of drugs that it does not make sense that I'm even still here, and I would still live, or somebody would freaking Narcan me. And I would be so mad, like, why would you just do that? Like, I've tried to fight people, like, why would you just Narcan me? Like, why do you hate me so much that you keep me alive? And so I got arrested, and this time I went to treatment, and I tried things my way, and I met a guy, and I learned to love me with him. And then when him went, the love for me went too. And I went back out for about 4 months after having 15 months clean. I overdosed 7 times and was raped multiple times in that 4-month period. That 4-month period, relapse was worse than my 20 years of drug use that I had been doing drugs. And I remember I came back to treatment, and I was never one to do 911 prayers. Like, and I was also never one, when I would go to jail, to like go to church or whatever. Like, if I wanted to get out of the dorm, I would just pick a fight, or I would fight somebody, or I would fake a fight, or whatever I had to do. But like, I was so against God. Like, everybody says like their biggest resentment was towards themselves, but I think my biggest resentment was towards God, because it was like, I grew up thinking that you were just so great and life would be good if you do all these things, and like, my life was not like that. And so I was so mad at him, like, why you do this for everybody else, but you don't do it for me? But when I went to jail this time, it was so weird. I grew this hunger for him, and like somebody gave me a recovery Bible, and I started reading it. And I remember like I would get so mad because I couldn't pronounce the words in the Bible, or I didn't know what name I was reading or whatever. But I just kept writing. I just kept reading it, and I went to treatment, and I met a girl there, and she had grew up in church. We actually almost fought, and I think it was just because I was so lost and I was so afraid of like what was to come. But what I knew was like I didn't believe that I could be successful and make it, but I also didn't want to go back out and live through it again because I knew I couldn't die. I don't know what it was, but something in me just knew I couldn't die. And I'm like, God hates me so much that he's making me live through this, that he won't even let me die. And so I didn't want to go back out, and I didn't want to live through it anymore. And even still to this day, I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid if I relapse, that I would live through it again. And so, I just became so desperate for him. And I didn't even know what it would do for me. And so, I met this girl, and we would read the Bible every day. And I started changing my music, because every time I would listen to certain music, it would like take me back, and I would be like, I was in the treatment facility, but really like my mind was on the south side. And so like I was realizing like things that I was watching and things that I was listening to was taking me back there. And so I started changing my music, and I looked up a whole bunch of Christian rap. And me and this girl would read the Bible, and people would make fun of us, but we didn't care. We also still had a lot of old ways, so it was like, you're not going to say nothing anyways, even if we are. And I just became really hungry, and I would walk to the church on the corner for my weekend passes. And I didn't know nobody from there, but I just knew like it was just something was just drawing me and drawing me and drawing me. And I got a spiritual mentor, and I started going to church in Portsmouth. And this spiritual mentor at the time told me, because I would tell her, like, I'm reading the Bible and I don't know what I'm reading. It's making me mad. Like, I feel stupid. I feel dumb. Like, I don't understand it. And I still don't know everything in the Bible. And so we went to Portsmouth, and she said that, you know, the word does not go away void. And so I'm like, okay, bet. I don't know what I'm reading, but I'm reading something. And I don't know what I'm getting, but I'm getting something. So I'm just going to keep reading it. And that's what I did. I just kept reading it. And one thing I always prayed for, that I would never lose my hunger for him. Like, I wanted to stay just as hungry now as I did in the beginning. And so I graduated treatment, I graduated transitional, I graduated outpatient, I went to sober living. I wasn't sexually active, nor did I engage with any men or entertain them, because not only was drugs my problem, but men was my problem too. And then I met a guy. I started going to Zion Baptist Church, and Rochelle Gray Buchanan started becoming my spiritual mentor. And I started building a foundation here, and I started building a home, and I started speaking all over Ohio, and I started educating nurses and doctors and law enforcement and state highway patrol and trainings. And God took my story, and he took the most shameful things, and he started to use it for his glory. The man who trafficked me was sentenced to 14 years. And I remember that day like it was nothing. And just finally feeling free, because my first 15 months of sobriety, I still felt like I was in prison and I was locked up because I was still looking over my shoulder. And I remember I wanted nothing to do with the case. I'm not testifying. I don't want no parts in it. Like, I just want to be left alone. And that was one of the hardest things, to be clean and still be feel imprisoned in your mind and feel like you can't talk to nobody because you don't trust anyone. So where are you supposed to go and share and talk about the things that you're dealing with? And then God sent me an angel, and her name was Jamel. I don't know why I'm so emotional. Oh. And she was my human trafficking advocate, and she was my voice. And she would come to see me, and she taught me how to pray. And she would be my voice throughout the case, because I refused to talk to anybody. And I still have a great relationship with her to this day. And then I got involved in catch court, and I graduated catch court, and I met another lady named Gwen. And she became like my second hero, and she became a person that I looked to for anything and everything. That helped me along the way. And I just started surrounding myself with people that were strong and that cared about me and that could help me along the way. Me and my sister became best friends, and she is my hero, and we're still best friends to this day. And she's still the relationship that we have, it's
it goes both ways. It's not just her on one end, but I can now finally be that sister that she's always needed, that she's always wanted, and she's forgave me for everything. And I have a great relationship with her and my nieces. And so I met a guy, and I had told myself that if I ever get into another relationship, that he's going to be the one, whom is now my husband, Timothy Stacy. And we have 2 daughters, which I didn't think that I could have kids due to everything that had happened to me. And so we had our first baby and we lost it. 5 months later, we got pregnant with Jesselyn, and we had her. And then the same year, we had Jesselyn in January. The same year in December, we had Paisley. So we had 2 daughters in the same year, and they are everything to me. We got our credit score up, which it wasn't hard for me because I was always on the run, so I never put my name on anything. And so I had really good credit, and we bought a house, and we have 3 vehicles now. We're financially fit. Our kids have college funds. I do normal things. Like, I'm a good person in the community. People don't even recognize me or know me for what I used to be or who I used to be. I got my GED. I got 9 cases and 17 charges expunged out of 1 county. I speak all over Ohio now, just doing different trainings for anywhere God wants to take me. One, to use my story for His glory, or just to try to educate and just to try to help get one more female out of the life, or whomever. And every day I get to help people. My husband's an associate minister of Zion Baptist Church. But life is still hard, right? You know, just because you get clean and you serve God, it doesn't mean everything is always going to be good. And I had to learn that the hard way. You know, it's so easy for us to just get mad at God when things don't go our way. And, you know, I've had some really hard life lessons in being clean. I'm almost 6.5 years in, and learning that. And so in October, we lost another baby. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, dude, like, God, I'm serving, I'm giving myself to the community, I'm giving myself to you, I'm doing everything right. Like, I don't know what else more can I do? Like, why would you do this to me? And I immediately had to check myself. And it's like, sometimes God's protection is not rejection. He could have been protecting me from something. And so I talk about that because I haven't bounced back from that, you know, and I've been, feel like, in a stretching season for a while. And so I say that to say this, that sometimes we go through those stretching seasons, but even when we go through those stretching seasons, God is still with us. It doesn't mean, we automatically go to, like, we just want to leave Him. But what about all the times we left Him, but He never left us? Or what about all the times that we went into the worldly things and not into the things that is good and of His nature? But He never left us. He never stopped loving us. And so for me, the season that I'm in is I want to draw near to Him and not run from Him when things go wrong or things aren't easy. And, you know, I've had to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet and build myself in a way that I can lift myself up, and I don't have to depend on anybody else. I don't need nobody else to do it for me. I know where my strength comes from. I know what I need to do to be able to pull myself out of things. And I'm going to be honest, I'm afraid to have a baby now. And I'm sharing that because I think it's important that even after the story and the glory, there's more things that happen. You know, there's just pruning that I feel like we go through. So if I could say anything, I would say give your heart to Christ, that you won't regret it, that even when it's hard, knowing that you can draw near to Him makes it so much easier. I'm so desperate for His love. He literally pulled me out of the pits of hell. I have no other answer. And I think that's what He did. He stripped me down completely to mold me back up, to show me that He is the only way. He is the truth. He is life. He is the air in my lungs. He is everything. And without Him, we are nothing. And so if you got anything from my story, I pray that you get that. God bless.